Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Suzanne Walker. We are coming to you from the Indiana State Library. I am very excited to have Shirley Mullin here from Kids Inc. and Katy Withers here from the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. Just a few things, housekeeping things about the webinar before we get started. Just a reminder, the webinar is being recorded. If you have any sound issues, please visit the Sound Issues pod at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. This webinar is worth 1 LEU, and I will upload that at the end. I will put it on the screen for you to download at the end of the webinar. So quickly, just a little bit about who I am. I'm Suzanne Walker. I work here at the Indiana State Library. That is the Indiana Young Reader Center, of which I am in charge of. I don't think that was a proper sentence. So I would really invite all of you to come and visit it. It is as great as it looks, if not better. And I'm also here with Katy Withers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katy Withers, and I help coordinate the Eugene and Marilyn Glick Indiana Authors Award, which is an annual program through the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation and is funded through the generosity of the Glick Fund, which is a fund of Central Indiana Community Foundation. We are celebrating 10 years of the award program, and so in honor of this anniversary, we're partnering with Indiana State Library and the Indiana Center for the Book to share some tips and best practices that we picked up over the years. So just a little information to set this up, and for those that tuned in last week, I apologize for the repeated information. The Indiana Authors Award's main goal is to encourage Hoosiers of all ages and backgrounds to farther engage in the literary arts, and that can be through writing or reading. So the award works in two ways. First, cash prizes are awarded in 4 different categories to authors with Indiana ties. Authors also designate a $2,500 grant to an Indiana public library of their choice. In 10 years, we've honored 46 authors and have given a total of $214,000 in cash prizes. Indiana public libraries throughout the whole state have received $77,500 in grant dollars. Second, readers and writers of all ages are introduced to the honored authors at outreach events that we do at schools and libraries. We've reached more than 3,000 people of all ages through this outreach. The centerpiece of these outreach events is Meet an Author, Be an Author, and that's a day of activities for book lovers and aspiring writers. We do workshops on writing, publishing, and marketing, and we partner with the Indiana Writers Center on those. Attendees have the opportunity to meet with the winning authors and more than 40 local authors each year. You can get LEU credits for attending, and that event is taking place on October 13th. So if you want more information on that, you can go to indianaauthorsaward.org for more info. So over the 10 years of the award program, we've honored several authors writing for children and teens. And when I first began coordinating the Authors Award program, I had no idea what a rich tradition of children's literature we have here in Indiana. And I continue to discover new authors every single year writing for children right here. So we're with Shirley Mullin, and she runs Kids Inc. Bookstore, which is at Illinois and 56th Street in Indianapolis. It's a lovely little bookstore if you haven't been. She has a wealth of knowledge about kids lit and about Indiana authors in particular. So I'm excited to hopefully learn about some new authors today.
Hi, Shirley.
Hi, thank you, Katy and Suzanne. Such a pleasure to be talking about children's authors. When Kids Inc. opened 32 years ago, there were only a very few authors in Indiana, children's authors. I had come from Denver, where there had been an opportunity to meet many children's authors, and I was kind of disappointed that Indianapolis had so few. The first author I did see in Indiana was in Fort Wayne. I drove up there to see Jean Craighead George, and I remember so well everything she said. But now we have so many wonderful authors. I'm going to start with John David Anderson. Dave, as he likes to be called, wrote several books, and then Miss Bixby's Last Day was really his breakout book, a wonderful, wonderful book about a good teacher. I love books about good teachers and successful teachers. This is his most recent book, Granted. He writes so many different types of things. This is fantasy, and it's about how fairies are chosen and go out to grant wishes. And with some help, as you can see on the cover, from a very smart dog.
Aww.
But this has been totally different than his previous book, Posted. This book is perfect to advertise because you can use Post-it notes and do all kinds of things with it. But this is actually a book set in middle school about kids who got their their cell phones taken away for using them inappropriately, and they resorted to communicating with Post-it notes. He's also written fantasy about a kid lost in a video game, all sorts of interesting things, and he does amazing author visits at schools and libraries. Laura Martin is fairly new. This is her third book. She lives in Zionsville. She taught for a number of years. Now she's home with 3 small children and is very successful. Her first 2 books were about, it's like Jurassic Park for younger people. Dinosaurs have been cloned and they've taken over the world, and people are living either in caves or in treetops. Float is funny, funny, funny. These are kids at a summer camp, not a camp you'd want to go to. It's a camp for kids, risk kids. And I never can remember exactly what that stands for. But at any rate, they're kids not really at risk, but kids who have unusual reoccurrences of identified scientific whatever.
That sounds close.
Yeah, something close. For example, on the cover, you can see one kid floating away. Well, he has to wear heavy boots, and if he takes them off, there's a danger that he'll just float away. And when that happens, they have to call in helicopters to grab him and bring him back to Earth. There's another kid who, if he touches something, it will burst into flame. A kid who, if he touches you, he will stick to you for hours.
Oh my
His hands
gosh.
are sticky.
The words.
They're all kids with special issues, and the government has them here at this camp to observe them and possibly use them in nefarious ways. She is also great at presentations, and when she can find or have her mother come babysit, she's happy to do school visits. Then we have Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, and she no longer lives in Indiana, but I like to claim her because she started in Indiana. Her first book, Ruthie's Gift, which is, I think, out of print now, we launched it at Kids Inc. many years ago, and so she moved south, maybe Tennessee, and she's done a number of books. The War I Finally Won, won a Newbery Honor in 2016, very well deserved. Well, this is actually the previous book won the award, The War That Saved My Life, and this is the sequel to that, The War I Finally Won. It's just, those 2 books are among the best, I think, of intermediate level and even young adult writing. And apparently they're being made into a movie, at least the first one.
Shirley, since you brought up whether or not she's an Indiana author, I mean, clearly you said that we claim her because she started here, but she's since moved away. Katy and I were just talking the other day about what we consider to be an Indiana author for our respective purposes. So for Katy, it's whether or not they can win their award.
Right.
And for me, it's whether or not we're going to collect them in our collections. And I think we are going to, the state library is going to go ahead and adopt, I think, what you guys have done.
Yeah.
So can you tell everybody?
Yeah, well, first I want to say Kimberly Brubaker Bradley is our national author winner this year for the Indiana Authors Award.
Good
We
job.
love her. Yeah, we're really excited. And she does come, her family is still in Indiana, so she visits frequently. But for the purposes of the award, the author either has to have been born in Indiana or have lived in Indiana for 5 consecutive years at any point in their life.
So 5 consecutive years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Well, she certainly meets that criteria. Then we have Rob Harrell, who graduated from DePauw and has lived, I think, on the West Coast and recently moved back to Indiana. Life of Zarf is his series, kind of a highly illustrated novels. I have never seen him present. I've been told that he's one of the most amazing presenters, and this series is really funny. But the one that excites me more is Monster on the Hill, which is a graphic novel, probably YA, and it's just a real interesting look at monsters and how do we respond to monsters, and why are we so afraid of what we don't know. The script is being written currently for this, and this is going to be made into a movie in the near future.
That's exciting.
Yeah, very interesting author. Then we have Mandy Davis. She taught in Indiana, moved away for a while, and is back in Indiana. And this is her debut book, Superstar. It's the closest I can say, it's a lot like Wonder, a great read. She's also a really interesting presenter. She's does a lot of presentations for grades 3 through 6, and her teaching background really shows in doing that. Helen Trust has been in Indiana for many years. She won a Prince Honor Award many years ago for Kish's House, and this is her latest book, Applesauce Weather, which is a Hoosier this fall. It's on the Young Hoosier Book Award list for the intermediate level this fall. It's a great story of a girl who's waiting for applesauce time when Grandpa will come, and it's a difficult time because there's been a death in the family. It's a very poignant book, and it's totally in verse, and Helen writes in the most intricate, interesting verse. When you get to the end, she'll sometimes explain how the verse goes together and what kind of poetry she has written. She has a very long list of books, Braid and others that are really amazing, and I think just really worth reading, particularly if you are a lover. Well, even if you don't like poetry, these are good stories.
I had a question about her poetry. Does she normally do like formal poetry, like
Yes.
with parameters that you have to kind of follow,
It's
etc.?
formal poetry.
Cool.
And sometimes the poems will include, like, if you look at the first letter of the poem all the way down, there's another word there. And she'll explain whether it's a cinquain or a quatrain or a couplet, or
Got it.
at the end she will say, these poems are this kind. And in one book, Crossing Stones, the poems where they cross the creek, the poem looks like a creek flowing. It curls. So her poetry is just so intricate and beautiful. She also does presentations. She's very quiet and very thoughtful, and just a really lovely, lovely author.
She has some nice picture books too that feature photos of different places in Indiana. So
That's right.
yeah, she does.
She's done some of those with a photographer. Those are really nice. And then Jeff Seymour, brand new, has lived in Lafayette most recently. Because of his wife's graduation and now her employment, they just moved to the East Coast. But Nadia Skyline and the Cloud Ship Rescue is the most interesting, I would say, science fiction I've read in years.
Wow.
It's like, and Hellquist, of course, is an amazing illustrator. The book is beautifully illustrated. And he's been writing for a while, but this book is about a futuristic time when travel is with cloud ships. And in the cloud ships, they grow their food. They grow up on the outside to feed the plants. Plants will respond better if they communicate with them and talk to them. And it's just so imaginative. This Nadia Skyline, the cloud ship she is on, is one that is filled with orphans who have been rescued, and they run this cloud ship with a very wonderful leader. The sequel's coming out in March, I think, of 2019. I'm really anxious to read it because it just can't I don't know how he can go any further. It's such a beautiful piece, and it's readable by third, fourth, fifth graders. Um, Probably could be read to younger children also. Really good imagination. Um, then we have Annie Sullivan. Annie lives in Indianapolis, and this is her first book, and it came out about 3 days ago.
It's got a beautiful cover.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yes.
She's a really interesting young woman, went through schools here, and is really working hard on becoming an author. This is a King Midas story, but it's really not King Midas. It's about what happens to his daughter 10 years later, after he turns her to gold and back. And
Oh my gosh, that sounds so exciting.
She's really interested in fairy tales. She's also interested in doing school visits. She's done some, but and library visits, but she's just, of course, getting started. And I do. She's just a really interesting young woman. We got to know her because she grew up across the street from one of my employees.
Oh, that's neat.
Strangely enough, yeah. And another debut book, Katy Hesterman, lives in the Fort Wayne area. And this also, I think Fort Wayne and poetry, that's where Helen Trust is too. This is also a poetic book. I think there's 16 poems, and that shows the kind of the life cycle of the robins. It's very engrossing, the eggs hatching, what happens when they learn to fly, they leave the nest. And Katy is amazing. She came to the store, and we had a whole bunch of young children who came to hear her. We billed it as a story time. And I thought, there's no way those kids are going to sit for a book of 16 poems. She made it so interesting, nobody moved.
Oh my God.
She's
cool.
really a great storyteller. She was nervous about it, but she did a great job. I'm just really anxious to see. I'm hoping that more books will be coming from her because, I say it's a book of poetry. It's a story. It's a story about robins.
Well, and I love the illustration. I love how the mama bird is sort of like clutching herself. Like she kind of looks like nervous and pleased and like,
She's
wow,
got a smile on her face.
Yeah.
I know.
She looks like, I think a lot of mothers probably feel when their children finally start walking and it's like, oh gosh, now they're going to be
Proud but
going
scared,
around.
yeah.
See, and I look at that and I'm thinking, she's thinking, will I ever get my figure back?
Oh.
That illustrator has done a lot of other books too. It's a very recognizable style. And then we have April Pulley Sayer. This is her latest book, and it's about the migration of warblers, and it's full of pictures of the whole migration and where they go. But it's not, warblers. There's a lot of different kinds of warblers, and so this shows all these different types of warblers and what they look like in flight and nesting and the whole cycle of warblers. And this was done with her husband. I'm not sure what part he played in it. April does do all of her own photographs for her books. She has many, many books. Almost all of them are nonfiction. There's a few that aren't. But
Is this one in a chant or?
it's not exactly
It's
a
not
chant.
really
No, not
chanty.
as much as some of hers.
Mhm.
But my favorite of her chant books are Go Go Grapes and Raw Raw
Yeah,
Radishes.
I love
Me
those.
too.
Yes, and those are wonderful chant books. My next door neighbor at our office had a little boy recently, several months ago, and I gave her a copy of Go Go Grapes. She's a photographer and an artist, and she's very honest. She said, Shirley, really, very few words, some photographs. I don't think a kid would like this. And a few days later, she comes over and says, okay, I want the rest. She was amazed at how even at like 3 months, his eyes were following and he would sit up and listen and she could do the whole book. She acted it out for me.
Well,
It's very cool.
and I love that April's work really has like a naturalist kind of bent
Yes.
to it, and she's kind of about conservation and really does focus a lot on nature. And she won.
Yeah, in a lot of these authors that Shirley's mentioned have won Authors Award, which is cool. But April Polisayer won our Genre Excellence Award for children's picture books in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, and she she travels to wherever these books are set.
Mm-hmm.
Like Here Come the Humpbacks, she went and saw them and she took the pictures. And she has books about ants and books about fish.
We just did Raindrops Roll yesterday in our story time.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's about rain,
one.
you know,
Uh-huh.
and it's beautiful.
Right, Raindrops Roll is wonder. That is a part of the series full of fall, Raindrops Roll, and then the
Best in Snow.
Best in
Yeah.
Snow.
Snow,
Yes,
that's a good
yes.
one.
What a
That's
great
wonderful-
title.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, those are a great series, and she's really interesting. She isn't available a lot for appearances, but she does do quite a few visits. I think she gets asked to travel a lot across the country.
And she's South Bend, I think.
North, yeah.
North, I think
Mhm.
she's in that area.
Yeah. And then Troy Cummings. If you want a book that just has a wonderful tie-in, Can I Be Your Dog? It's about a dog that is rescued. He asks different different people if he can be their dog, and eventually finds a family that wants him. And when we launched this book, we offered a discount if you bought a can of dog food or
that's
cat
cool.
food. We had our front window full of pet food for this book. And Troy, he kind of amazes me. When he talks to children, there's no one else in the room. He talks to each child, eye to eye, individually, and then he shakes their hand. It's pretty amazing. You'll all know him more for his notebooks of doom, which I think there's 12 or 15 now. I should know that, and they're being translated into Spanish, and those are very, very popular. He does amazing presentations with children. I hear lots of good things about him all the time.
I'm gonna interject again. We had him for our Letters About Literature ceremony a few years ago, and maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, and he talked about this book before it had been published. And he was just we were really excited about the tie-in about letters, and I'm just going to do a shameless plug for Letters About Literature.
Yeah,
So
good.
Letters About Literature is a program where children write to an author, living or deceased, whose one work has made a difference in their life. I can put the website in the chat so that you guys can learn more about that program. But this was such a perfect book to talk about because it is about letter writing. So that was really cool.
It's a great book, too. And then we have Terry Border, who lives in Indianapolis and seems to be one of the best kept secrets of children's authors. He did a book called Peanut Butter and Cupcake, Milk Goes to School. He is a professional photographer, got really tired of that life, and for a number of years he baked in a Marsh bakery. So now, if you see his books, he creates everything with bread and other things that he bakes. And then he makes these books, and he makes actually like dioramas, is the only thing I can think of to call them, and then he photographs them. And how can you not love a guy that comes and appears in like a fisherman hat covered with Christmas lights, you know, the kind that twinkle on batteries? He is a character. He's just really, really fun. I really hope that we see more of him and more of his work.
And so kind of eclectic too, I think.
Really eclectic, yes. But the books are incredibly funny. Kids love them. Milk Goes to School is just perfect for this time of year. Keiko Kaza has not done anything new in a few years. You know, she spends about half of her time in Japan, where she's from, and then then she's in Bloomington part of the time. But she's been back more lately in Indiana, and she's been out doing a lot of school visits. And I just wanted to say that for people who are looking for authors, Keiko is really incredibly good and has been appearing more and more in Indiana. Then an author that you might not think of or know, Sandy Sasso did this one with Amy Jill Levine, and it's a retelling of the parable of the mustard seed. She has another one with the parable of the sheep called Who Counts? And Sandy is a rabbi, and it's interesting that she's retelling parables from the New Testament. But if you read this, you'll totally understand how it applies to all of us.
And she has a few other picture
Oh,
books
she has a lot
too.
of picture
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
Some of the others are, well, a lot of them are ecumenical. Some of them are Jewish, more aimed at Jewish children, but most of them are very ecumenical. And this is totally interesting. We tried to grow mustard plants for her book, but didn't work.
And Sandy Eisenberg Sasso is our regional author winner this year.
That's right. I remember that.
Cool.
Yes. And she is known, actually, she's known very nationally, but she was the first female rabbi, I believe.
Yeah, and her husband, I think, were like the first rabbi couple.
Such a neat people that we get to claim here because she lives
Right.
here. It's so great.
Yes, she's been here a long time. She's now retired from Bethel Zedek, but she's still working a lot in the community, running different, helping with different events. And then we have Kathy Jority, who's from Cherville, and this is her first book, Don't Feed the Bear. Just a funny, great book for story time. She also has a husband who does really silly magic tricks. And if you meet Kathy, chances are you may also meet her husband, who just entertained children while she was reading. He did all sorts of simple magic, but just perfect for kids. Rebecca Doclets, this book is not out yet. It comes out in just a couple of weeks. It's a board book. Beautiful, beautiful book. Just a simple story. This one is one of her last ones, Race Car Count, which is so perfect for Indiana.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We used this book, I think, last year to promote at the National Book Festival. And we almost never sell a bunch of books at the National Book Festival, but we sold out of this one. I think people were just excited to, see it and equate it with Indiana. It was cool.
Right. And of course, all of her books are poetry. They're picture books and longer picture books. She's done books with Jane Yolen and with a lot of other authors. She's in many collections. She probably has about 20 books of her own, plus she's in many collections. And she even has some Pearl and, can't think of the rest of it. Anyway, books that are beginning readers, which are perfect for the younger children too. And Peggy Archer, this is her new book, came out in March, A Hippy Hoppy Toad. She also writes quite a bit in poetry. Other books that you might know are Name That Dog and Turkey Surprise, which is just a great book for Thanksgiving. Yeah. She lives, I think, she lives in Indiana. I'm just not sure where. But
I just read this book yesterday.
Oh, did you?
And it has kind of really rhythmic rhyming. And I think if you were going to do it for story time, you'd want to practice it beforehand.
Right.
But it's a cute story, and the pictures are really lovely, really cute.
Yeah. And she was somewhere and saw a toad and was inspired to write this. And she said she didn't have time. She had 2 weddings that year, and when she was writing this, but she just felt really moved to do that. And she hadn't done very much with poetry, so this was a sort of a challenge for her. Skyler Brown. This, again, is poetry. You might not even realize that when you read it because your just mouth is hanging open. It's a retelling of the Donner Party.
Oh my God.
It's so good.
It is really good. Skylar lives in the Bloomington area. She's done some easier books. Slickety Quick, poems about sharks. And then she has one coming, Clackety Tracks, poems about trains. she's done a number of visits in public libraries in southern Indiana. And this book is somehow poetry and the Donner Party is an interesting combination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way to tell the story.
It's a beautiful cover.
Yes, it is, to stay alive. And now we don't need to talk about John Green very much. Turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
John is a phenomenon. He is just a phenomenon. And he's just wonderfully lovely and supportive, and he lives close to Kids Inc. One day, one of my staff popped her head in the office and said, Shirley, come out here. Somebody's writing in books.
Oh, God.
I don't know what to do. And I went out there, and there was John, and he was pulling his books off the shelf and signing them.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And she was all panicked. And I said, oh, meet John Green. And she's like, oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Oh.
But he would do that without saying anything. But he is, he and his brother run so many charities, and they're doing so much incredible work and donating to so many wonderful causes. And they're doing a book soon. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. It's not coming through normal channels. A book of poetry by teens, and it has a poem from my oldest granddaughter in it.
Aw,
and
cool.
She's a big fan, and she's so excited. She got to come last fall and meet him when he was on tour for Turtles All the Way Down, which is such a wonderful book, and so wonderful that he exposed his illness and shared it, and was such a comfort to some people.
Mm-hmm.
One of my staff walked out of his presentation and said, I have never felt so loved. She has the same, some of the same issues. Now this is a little weird for me to talk about.
Go ahead, we'll let you. Yeah. It's fine.
This, of course, is my son's book, Surface Tension. I know a lot about it. It's been through so many revisions. He is such a particular writer, and he rewrites, and characters are gone, and new characters, and things move around. And I've read a couple of different versions of it, and every time it just makes me so nervous because the book is so intense. But it's a wonderful book, and I think the cover is just among the best ever.
Stacy says, my 8th graders are reading Surface Tension like crazy.
Yes. Yes. And the whole Asphalt series has been so popular.
Beth Lang says that his books are so great and he needs to write faster.
Yeah.
So maybe you can let him know that.
He actually, I can say this, I'm his mother. What can he do? Can he fire me?
Right.
No. He actually is writing an intermediate level book, which
we're all excited.
Suggested he might do that. And he and his wife went on a canoe trip. They went to the Boundary Waters and were totally off the grid for like 7 days, and we worried about them unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. They're well equipped to do that. But he came back and he said, I just got a great idea for a book. So I don't know. Haven't seen it. But he's writing something younger. Yeah. Yes, and I'm hoping it will be faster.
And Stacy's also wondering, is there going to be an Asphalt 4?
Yes, the Asphalt 4, I think, is close to done.
Okay, great.
Yes, and that Asphalt 4, I don't know a lot about it. I suggested one day, while riding in the back seat, he was in the front seat with Margaret, and my husband and I were in the back seat, and he was telling me about Asphalt, that there's going to be an Asphalt 4, and I said, he said, I don't know what I'm going to do because Alex is kind of tired. And I said, well, why doesn't Darla take over? And Darla can rule the world.
Yeah.
And he turned around and said to me, Mom, Darla doesn't want to.
Well,
so that's it.
You can't argue with that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where Asphalt 4 is going to go, but I know it's not going to be with Darla leading the charge. But it'll be good, I'm sure. And there will be some other one. And I think Surface Tension, when I read the last version here, I think it's going to have a sequel.
Yeah, I could see
There's
that.
a missing,
Well,
I won't spoil it, but
don't feel bad about talking about your son. Everyone is excited about it. Just fine.
well, I'm not surprised that he's a good author. Now, All Out is Sandra Mitchell, also an Indianapolis author. What?
I love that cover.
Oh,
I've
the
seen that
cover's
cover.
wonderful.
It's
Yeah.
lovely.
I just want to say one thing about this book. I had the ARC, and we have an office separate from the store, and there's a Forrest in the same strip who really, he's an older man, and he came out late in life, and he started the Gay Pride Parade. Some of you may know who that is, but at any rate, I took an ARC down and wrote him a note and said, I think you might like this. And he, about 3 days later, came charging down the way in his car, slammed on his brakes. I was leaving the office, and he said, Shirley, thank you. And I said, what? I was kind of like confused. And he said, have you read the Robin Hood story in here? And he started to cry.
Oh.
He said, this book is so important. And he said, I love it so much. And he said, I'm going to take it down to the teen center, the Center for Teens, LGBT teens. He said, I'm going to take it down there tonight and give it to him.
That's cool.
Yeah, he was so moved by this book. And I thought, that's all the recommendation I need. The stories are wonderful.
Can you talk about the cover? I can't remember. Are you the one that talks about the cover, or did I hear that directly from Sandra?
You must have heard it from
Okay,
Sandra.
so Sandra said, I spoke with her at the Nerd Fest Indy, which is a great event that's free, and you guys should all go to it. But she was there, and I spoke to her about this, and she said, I wanted a cover that was that didn't scream rainbows and didn't, she said, I just wanted it to be an attractive cover that kids would feel okay carrying around school. I didn't want the cover to out them, even though if you read what's written on the cover, but of course also anyone can read this book,
Right.
but she just wanted it to be a beautiful book. And I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is.
It's a nice trim size. It's got those really great pages. It's just wonderfully done. We've gotten a bit of blowback from it,
Have
people.
you?
Yeah, people say I can't have that in my school, come on,
Come on.
grow up.
Yes.
Yeah,
There we go.
the world is here. Any rate, Tyler Johnson
is also here.
Yes, he is
Was here.
Yeah. Jay Coles is an Indianapolis resident. He grew up here, went to Lyndhurst Junior 7th, 8th grade center. He's taught in the Indianapolis public schools. I think he is writing full time now.
That's great.
But he did some self-published books, but this is his real, it's being called his debut, first book published by Hachette, and it is a tough book and important and powerful and a must read. It covers issues of gun violence and Black Lives Matter and justice and the meaning of freedom, all in a really wonderfully told story. And isn't that an interesting cover?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
He's
Very,
a great
very
speaker
different.
too. We've had him at
Yes.
the library. He's great.
Yeah, he's really interesting. Very, very, he's young. He's really young. I hope we'll see a lot more from him soon. And Philip Hughes. Now, do you claim him as a
We do,
Indiana?
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
We do too. Yes.
He grew up in Speedway. And this is the book that comes out in the end of October. I just started this book and just said, so be it for work. I took the book and went home and finished it.
Oh, that's great.
I know, it's one of those, I don't read as much nonfiction as I would like, but this is about addicts, Oscar Robinson, and the basketball team that awakened the city, the subtitle you see. And there are things in this book. I mean, I've lived in Indiana a long time. I'm not a native. I'm an import, but I've lived here a long time, and there are things, I've been to addicts, and I've done things at addicts, and I worked at the hospital, nearby, and we had some things going on at addicts. I've never heard this story. This has information that I was so amazed by. Um, Mr. Hughes his family used to go downtown every Sunday, and they would cross the street, the 16th Street Bridge, from Speedway into what is now Hawville, in that area, near where Eskenazi is. And he would notice that the kids were different, and he wondered about them. But people from there didn't go downtown; they couldn't afford it, and they weren't welcome. So he always kind of wondered about the kids that lived on the other side of the bridge while he was growing up. And of course, he went on to write about a lot of wonderful nonfiction, like he did Claudette Colvin, the book on Claudette Colvin.
Right.
It's so powerful. But this book tells about how the Ku Klux Klan conspired with, and they were in some of the leadership roles in Indianapolis at the time, they conspired to create Christmas attics so that Black students would not be in the schools with their kids. The Klan actually helped start the school. And it backfired on them.
Right.
It backfired on them big time. And he goes through all of that. And I never knew that. So when they started winning, and I had no clue how hard it was for them to win. In order for that team to win, they had to be ahead at halftime by about 20 points. Because in the second half, the refs would give it away.
Oh,
They would cheat and give it away. I know, it was just amazing. So they really worked to get way ahead, and that's how they won. Well, so when they became so successful and there was a move to have them compete, they weren't allowed to compete with other schools in the city, but neither were the Catholic schools allowed to compete. So finally, when that happened, that they were going to be allowed to compete, then the Klan they helped with integration because they wanted these wonderful basketball players spread all over the city so that addicts wouldn't win all the time.
oh my gosh.
But the coach, he's amazing. He'd grown up in Whiteland, and he didn't know, he hadn't had so much prejudice against him. And he was an amazing coach. He actually, at one point, hired the field house. It wasn't called, at Butler.
It wasn't Hinkle.
It wasn't Hinkle. It was just the Butler field house, I guess. He rented it, and then this team that would play him from northern Indiana came in, and they sold tickets, and they made like quite a bit of money, like maybe $5,000, and they split it. Wow. And he eventually was bringing in enough money that he could finally buy uniforms for these players. They had been wearing discarded Butler uniforms. They practiced on the stage at it. They did not have a gym.
Gosh.
I mean, it was the story of these people is amazing. And the Robertsons, of course, there were three brothers, and every summer they went and worked on their grandparents' farm in Tennessee. And Oscar was the little brother, and he was always kind of, they picked on him some, and all the little brother stuff. But he went down there one summer at like 5'7". He was 5'7", and he came back at 6'2".
Oh, gosh.
And all muscle, and they couldn't.
Gosh.
He could beat them at basketball then.
Yeah.
And they all played in a dirt lot with some of the time with rags tied together. They didn't have equipment, when they were children, and they were living in a lot of those shotgun houses and very, very poor. But they had spirit, and the coach insisted that they. He fed them. He fed them. He took care of them when he needed to. He did everything.
Well, and this
it's an
one,
amazing book.
What a beautiful photograph too.
I know. I love the photograph. I love the photograph, and it's full of pictures. And any teacher librarian is going to love this book because he gives source notes. They're all there. There's a huge bibliography, and all the interviews, when this book is published, all the interviews he has archived, and you'll be able to access them on YouTube.
That's That's
Because
great.
he's interviewed Oscar Robinson, he's interviewed, I don't know, 20, 30 people, and we'll be able to listen to the originals
That's really
once the book
powerful.
comes out.
Great.
It's just the background information is wonderful. He's coming November 1st to Indianapolis. We're just not quite sure where yet. I'm working on that, but we're not sure where he's going to be, but I hope everywhere.
I hope so.
Where else can I take it?
That's great. Well, Shirley, I want to thank you so much for sharing your vast knowledge of authors. Sherry asks, is there a written list of books that Shirley shared today? I do have that list, so I can send that out to everyone who attended today, and also anyone who registered and were unable to attend. I'm going to go ahead and put your LEU up on the file share, and Lisa, if you want to go ahead and stop the recording, you can.